Joining us to discuss what is going on in the Middle East and how Joe Biden has made it all incalculably worse, his great friend of the show, Newsweek editor, opinion editor, Batya Ungar-Sargon. Batya, let's kick off with Joe Biden again proving he doesn't have a clue about the geography of the Middle East. Have a look at this.
And I made it clear to Israelis, don't move on Haifa. It's just not, I mean, anyway, I just...
Now, Batya, I don't know, the last time I checked, Haifa was a city in Israel. What is he talking about here?
Yeah, how unfortunate. Haifa is one of the major cities in Israel. It's a beautiful city. It's one of the cities where there are many, many Arab Israelis and many Jewish Israelis living in beautiful harmony together. It really is a utopian place. Of course, he meant that he's been talking to them about not moving on Rafah, which is the next frontier in the war to eliminate Hamas that Israel is waging very aptly in Gaza. You know, poor Joe Biden just can't keep the name straight.
Yeah, and Batya, you know, we've seen this is just only kind of the slightly comical bit of what is actually a real tragedy that's playing out in the Middle East with Joe Biden's Iran policy. How much of this, too, is kind of a vindication of the Donald Trump foreign policy? I mean, the Abraham Accords under Trump, you saw finally that alignment of Sunni Arab interest, you know, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, with Israeli interest, which is, of course, all of these states have a very huge interest in not seeing Iran and the mullahs in Iran become the dominant power in the Middle East, despite that being apparently what Barack Obama and now Joe Biden seem to want to encourage. So it's a bit of a vindication for the Trump foreign policy plan, isn't it?
It is such a good point, James. Donald Trump has saved thousands of Israeli and Palestinian lives with the Abraham Accords, because without that, many of those drones would have landed, and he's never gotten credit for this. He was able to pursue these peace accords between Israel and these Sunni Arab states, and we know that Saudi Arabia is keen to join despite everything that's happened since October 7th. President Trump never gets credit for this because the entire foreign policy expert class said it couldn't be done, and Trump showed up with two lawyers and his son-in-law, and they got that passed. It's a huge vindication. I'm so glad you pointed that out.
Yeah, but Batya, also, too, there are domestic considerations with this as well. I mean, we saw over the last week, you know, the Golden Gate Bridge shut. We saw the approaches to O'Hare Airport in Chicago shut. You've got this sort of lunatic pro-Hamas activist class out there that seems determined to spread mayhem. How much of this is indicative that there's going to be a big problem for Joe Biden specifically at that Chicago Democrat convention that's coming out? And it feels to me like we're heading to a replay of 1968 when Lyndon Johnson had huge riots and unrest at his Chicago convention over the Vietnam War. It feels like we're very much seeing a replay of that now in 2024.
I think the difference being there was a lot of support for the protesters then. A lot of Americans were against the Vietnam War. 80% of Americans stand with Israel. And so this is, like you said, a lunatic fringe. It's an elitist fringe. All of the money from this is coming from elitist NGOs. All of the activists are from the over-credentialled, college-educated elites. Most of the activism is happening on college campuses, and they are deeply, deeply unpopular. People cutting off traffic to an airport are not people who are trying to create a vast movement with a lot of support. They are people trying to consolidate their own sense of their own superiority and that they are so much better than everybody else. They do not want mass support for Palestinians among Americans because they want the right to feel morally superior, when the truth is they're moral idiots, they're moral imbeciles. Of course, Israel is the just party in this war, and they stand with Hamas. Everybody can see it.
Batya, I'm so glad that you mentioned a morally superior elite that's full of imbeciles, because I also wanted to talk to you about what's been going on at National Public Radio. And National Public Radio, for Australian viewers, it's sort of like, I don't know, it's like an even more communist version of Radio National here. A longtime senior editor called out the organization's bias this week, and now they've got a new CEO coming in who seems like she was brought in from woke white woman central casting, and she's all into censorship, and she wants to censor the entire internet. Here's her talking about the First Amendment.
the number one challenge here that we see is, of course, the First Amendment in the United States is a fairly robust protection of rights.
So now you've got this major media outlet in the U.S. headed by somebody who believes in censorship. Batya, this seems to be a real, almost sort of attack on journalism from within.
It's so funny, isn't it, James, to see journalists opposed to the First Amendment? The thing that your viewers need to understand is that this is not about politics. She's not an imbecile because she's a leftist. She's an imbecile because she's been educated at elite institutions and is part of an economic elite that has developed extremely intolerant viewpoints to protect their status. This is all about economics. The average listener of NPR used to be your average middle American, middle-income American, middle-class person, working-class person. It is now only the elites that listen to NPR, only the far left, only people with multiple degrees. That's who they're catering to. And you know what? They can have those people. They can keep talking to them. They've basically lost their reputation, but also their mass appeal. If they want to keep talking to, the top 5% of Americans and perpetuating these gross woke ideas, let them have it.